Welcome to the Operate Intelligently podcast. I'm Brian McDonald, coming to you from Dude Solutions. Today we have a great topic for you. We're going to talk about energy management. And coincidentally, October is Energy Awareness Month. Joining me today are Dan Arant, who is our Senior Energy Specialist here at Dude Solutions, as well as a familiar voice, DK, Dave Cornegie, the Mayor, our subject matter expert extraordinaire, as we like to call him. Gentlemen, welcome.
How are you doing?
Thanks, Brian.
So with October being Energy Awareness Month, what are some of the recent changes that some of our listeners should be aware of with energy management?
I'll actually start that off, Brian. I think probably the most recent change that I've seen in the industry that's having kind of a widespread impact would be Energy Star changing their scoring parameters for benchmarking and energy efficiency in buildings. And what that has created is overnight, facilities that were once Energy Star scored because of the new scoring metrics could have fallen out of those categories. So that's caused a lot of folks in the industry to really tighten their belts and get more granular with their energy programs to get those scores brought back up.
So, what's some of the challenges with the change in scores that you've seen or that kind of, companies have to be aware in regards to their energy management of their facilities?
Yeah, the biggest change is just that it happened overnight. And so an organization performing the same energy conservation measures and then automatically overnight those measures, capturing the low-hanging fruit or auditing the bills, those have less of an impact in relation to their Energy Star score. So essentially, folks are being asked to do more for the same score they had, the previous day or month or year.
And I think that's something that's going to have to be communicated for not just the organization, but people outside of the organization. Energy Star is one of the things that I've seen over time people rely on. They like to publish their score. They might use it for PR purposes. If there are changes, they might need to make people aware of what those changes are. And I see Energy Star as part of a larger set of trends and changes I've seen over time. It's part of a larger trend of business intelligence. Energy Star is essentially a key performance indicator, a KPI. And I've seen where people are now getting more and more interested in the data. They want to dive down into, what is driving the Energy Star score? What is driving our cost? What's driving our basically our KPIs? A lot of these trends, they want to know, okay, what building is bringing us down? What area is bringing us up? We want to be able to understand what's out there and then communicate that to people. And I've really seen a larger trend of trying to get information out, trying to communicate with people to see that we need to get more involvement. We need to get more people aware of what's happening. So that's really a great tie-in to October is we need to make people aware about what's happening. And the people that are being affected by energy have to be aware of what's happening. And communication is a major aspect.
Yeah, and I'm glad y'all mentioned communication because I think it's always one of the key components to any plan. But specifically with energy management, what are some of the kind of communication strategies that y'all have seen people are doing out there in the market today?
I'll take the first one on that and then let Dan jump in on it. I think for many people, they try to just publish information. That's one thing that is a great, foundation. But many people, they may try to translate some of the benefits of energy to say, this would be the equivalent of something. They try to put it in language that people can understand. If we are turning off these lights in a major area like an arena, a football stadium, a section of an athletic park, that might translate to this could put this many, like if it's let's say, for example, education, this might actually translate over to this is how many jerseys that we can get. Some people are also doing incentive programs around that where they might put money back into a certain project, a certain initiative, a certain service. I've seen where people will have communications that are going out periodically, some type of a cadence of reports and dashboards, but they may also include things such as their auto signatures, kind of a fact versus fiction. There's a lot of people that make assumptions about what's happening when we turn on the lights. They might still think about when they were kids and their parents said, it takes this much energy to turn it on. Now with technology and things like lights, it's pretty much instantaneous. It's not taking a huge power surge. Or what happens when you pour grease down a drain? You think it goes into the drain hot, but once it hits underneath in the cool ground, that grease will start to to basically geo and plug the pipes. So trying to make people aware of little things in the fact versus fiction. I've also seen where people are leveraging other folks as boots on the ground. That's something we've done in the past, where we essentially have someone who's helping check on things, making sure that things are turned off or that things are in a rest mode, making people aware about what's happening. I've seen that in all across, from companies to various types of organizations, even in going back to education. Sometimes people get the kids involved, even down to elementary schools, where if you want to see something powerful, put a badge on an 8-year-old and have them go around and look if the lights are on. There's nothing more powerful than that. But I've also seen where people are setting up reports and dashboards on things like kiosks, where there's immediate access, either online or actually in a physical kiosk, to be able to pull up what's the information in this area. Might even tie it into solar arrays and what type of pull is coming from those solar panels once people are getting into things like alternate technology and new technology. So Dan, anything that you've seen as far as communication strategies?
Yeah, no, I would agree with all of those points, DK. And I would just add, the reason why communicating is important is not just to educate. I think the latest data that I saw showed 56% of savings opportunities comes from behavior change. So of course, educating the workforce, educating our peers is going to cut into that opportunity. The other reason I think it's important to communicate is kind of post-education. So, an organization can do a great job of letting folks know of opportunities. The fact versus fiction that you mentioned is a great idea, but then also communicating the results after that time period to kind of let folks see, kind of the psychological factor of, what you're doing is working, and now I want to show you that it's working. It helps, promote that continual effort from peers.
And I think the other thing that's interesting about this, and listening to you all talk, is energy management is so proactive. You can't be reactive in energy management, right? You can be reactive in looking at where are areas that you want to improve upon because you see a huge cost associated with it. But I think the communication and making sure that you stick to it and put it in their terms so that people can consume it easily. And they become proactive and less reactive as well. And so, much like what we see in say marketing, where we create an army of fans that are going to go out and tell everybody how great we are instead of us having to do it all the time.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point, Brian. Being proactive, it can sound like a lot, sound like it's another hat that I've got to put on, but it can be something as simple as creating what I like to call a simple strategic energy plan. And it really just follows the data. It's an easy, step 1, 2, 3 process that number one, assess where we're at today. And based on that data, step 2, prioritize and plan based on where we're at today. And then step 3, maintain and report on the success of that plan. It can be something as simple as that 1, 2, 3 that kind of creates this cyclical, proactive approach. Even things like, we have an inventory on our motors, and we have a replacement strategy that says if this motor fails, we will replace it with an energy efficient motor. The reason I use that example is a lot of organizations don't have those replacement strategies, those simple plans in place. And so, a maintenance technician could respond to a failed motor and just replace it with the same motor that's in place, not knowing that there's, this energy strategy. So I think you're exactly right, being proactive.
Stay up to date on free resources specific to your industry by visiting Dude Solutions Resource Library at dudesolutions.com/resources. You'll find inspiring infographics, blog posts, guides, and all of our podcast episodes to enrich your daily work. Keep up with everything new in the world of operations at dudesolutions.com/resources. So we all know that getting started with any kind of plan is a challenge within an organization. We're dealing with people in different departments and bureaucracy and such. So DK, I wanted to ask you, what are some obstacles that you see when it comes to energy management, kind of getting a plan in place?
Well, that's actually a good continuation about what Dan was talking about, is people have to know essentially where they need to start and where they need to go. And sometimes it's having the equipment information. eventually you've also got to get buy-in, you've got to get funding, and people are looking at how they get started. Sometimes it's really easy to go directly into a scope of work. You've got to have, basically, if you're going to sell it to the executives, you got to have an executive summary. But eventually, if there is interest, then you've got to define that scope of work. But you've also got to have a return on investment. You've got to understand, and like Dan was saying, you've got to have data to help with the understanding about what it is that essentially that we're going to do. Because if we don't have information, it's hard to assess the energy accounts and assess our processes and how we're managing it and prioritize those efforts to start developing our action plans and how we're going to accomplish them and reduce our distractions that are out there. We need to be able to measure and verify what's out there. And then once we've got our analysis down, we can start developing our how we're going to adapt it and how we're going to drive awareness and make sure we've got the accuracy and the immediacy set for that to start going into our conservation plans and reduce and avoid our costs and especially our consumption. That's really one of the biggest things that we're also trying to avoid too, because that directly gets involved in cost. Dan, I'm sure you've seen a lot of other obstacles and hurdles as well.
Yeah, and you're right, DK. What I've seen as the biggest hurdle would just be fear of so many moving parts. A lot of folks who are energy managers also, share the title of facility manager. So, you've got a role where you're concerned with maintaining the facility or maintaining the space, and you've also got a role concerned with doing that in a way that promotes conservation. And so I think how we began the conversation, why folks are concerned with, this new Energy Star change is being able to benchmark facilities is a really great and easy first step. In terms of being able to take the snapshot of where we are today. There are two main ways that I see in the industry that are good, easy places to start. Number one would be, understanding and tracking your utility bills and understanding, am I paying the right amount of money on my bills and being able to ask the question, where are my energy dollars going? And being able to benchmark really helps answer that question, where are my energy dollars going? And so just kind of tying back to the original statement of Energy Star and why we should be aware of that is because it's a great starter for organizations to benchmark and see where they need to prioritize their time and resources on facilities that are outside of the norm in their portfolios.
The Energy Star information is very timely. What are some other things that are very critical, as companies are looking and organizations are looking at managing their energy within their facilities?
Yeah, I think to answer that question, Brian, I think one, and it's kind of an intangible, but it's very important, is just to understand and consider that you don't have to, if you're an energy manager or a facility manager in your organization, you don't have to do this alone. You don't have to manage energy in a silo. I think it's important for folks to leverage the resources, the people resources they've got at their organization, because there's a lot of people in the organization, your peers, that really care about conservation. Whether it be a financial person that just cares about the dollars and cents and reducing their cost, or whether it be, the other bucket, a person that really cares about reducing consumption and reducing carbon emissions. I think a great place to start is to kind of identify those people and perhaps even create a green team, a council of folks that kind of help drive this energy plan. But just knowing that you don't have to do this alone is a really key takeaway, moving forward with these energy plans.
Yeah, and people is definitely one of the things I look at as well. I go back to often the ITIL model that you have to have a healthy balance between people, processes, and tools or technology. People part is one of the things that could either be overbalanced or underbalanced. We might be dealing with old technologies. We might need to upgrade. Are we going to go from pneumatic to digital controls? Are we getting into the Internet of Things with a lot of what we're doing around energy management? We also have to think of how people affect that. I mean, certainly, people leaving things on and phantom loads and all these other things that people may not have a realization about. Having, like you were saying, having an energy team, a green team is one of the things that's worked well. Also being able to incentivize those folks that you might get things started, but you always have to ask, how are we going to maintain it? How are we going to make sure that this team stays fresh, stays engaged, stays involved? A lot of times people, they do it out of the goodness of their hearts. Sometimes people need a little gamification, or they need a little some type of incentive. We're going to do something for the department. It's going to go back into some type of a fund. Something that people can feel as though their efforts are being tangible. Certainly the data will help with that, to show that, yes, we did make an impact in electricity, or make an impact in recycling. We do want to see that to prove it. But is there something we can get in the long run out of this? Some people, they just love recognition. They love seeing that we are in the top 3 of something. We are one of the most recognized areas out there. And that's where Energy Star is great, is they recognize these industry leaders in energy conservation. There's a lot of great public relation. There's a gold mine in that. But again, it comes back down to the people. If we're going to be rolling out something like a change in our building automation scheduling, how does that affect the working environment, the learning environment, the health and care environment, the membership environment? How does that affect it? Because people, yes, they might be bringing in space heaters, but you also need to have a good, comfortable working environment for them. So when you're setting up things like your schedules, you need to be able to work with that, and also having the proper technologies in place, the proper tools in place. And sometimes we actually use that, in another way. We knew that a lot of people were complaining about the temperature of a room. And so one of the past projects I worked on, we actually put in fake thermostats. We called them the Fisher-Price thermostats. And just the fact that it was controlled through a building automation system, but somebody was going up and clicking the buttons, we actually saw almost a 33 to 35% reduction in hot and cold calls, because people just felt like they needed to be able to control their environment. So I like a healthy balance of the people and the processes and the tools involved. And energy management, to me, is no different than that.
I love that example with the fake thermostats. I think that's great.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off that, DK, I think you're right when you talk about incentivizing. To give another example, kind of a real world scenario, we all follow the news, and we see, here even in the last year, a lot in the education realm, a lot of teachers protesting, their pay. Teachers protesting the fact that their budgets are continuously shrinking, but classroom sizes are growing. And I think it's been helpful for a lot of our clients to be able to show and to communicate that energy management really can be treated as a revenue source. To be able to create what we call kind of a green revolving fund, to say that, hey teachers, the reason it's important for you to join us in this energy management process is because the money that we save, we can put into a fund. Now, whether you want to use that fund to, continually improve the conservation program and buy better equipment, or you wanted to use some of those dollars to go towards, a budget for teachers to buy supplies or whatever it may be. The fact is, energy makes up 16% of all controllable costs in an organization. So what that means is you have a budget and a fund here that you can control and turn into kind of a revenue source. So I think you're exactly right, being able to communicate that this impacts the entire organization to allow us to do more with the same resources. The other portion that you mentioned in terms of just transparency, that's a big burden that facility and energy managers deal with, is just consoling and dealing with these hot, cold calls and making sure people know. The reality is, energy conservation doesn't have to battle your comfort. If it's this conservation versus comfort mentality, well, we want to stay comfortable. And if we're transparent with our clients about, or, our clients can be transparent with their stakeholders about, hey, here's transparency into our automation schedules. Here's when the facility comes on. Here's when it goes off. Here's the set points. I'm not, this green monster in the background, trying to burn you out of a facility. We've really got some processes in place that are standard. Has been a huge help as well.
Perfect example of where we've seen programs from Energy Star about when you're taking a building at rest. People need to understand when the building is essentially coming awake and when it's going to rest, or I guess technically it's occupied versus unoccupied, but letting people know that this is essentially what the set point is going to be during that season. Having a lot of those standard operating procedures out there, I think, is where if people have an understanding of it, they can at least see, okay, yes, it is going to be 72 degrees during this time of the year. That is 2-point difference in that. Again, it comes back down to where we were starting in the beginning. It's about awareness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think another great point, Dan, when you were mentioning the things that are important to everyone, the controller, it might be how much energy savings, other people, it might be the conservation effort. But that ties back into the communication as well, because you can kind of highlight those different points that are of most interest to them. And then it revolves back into the pride and the motivation that they want to do to be a part of the energy.
Well, everybody in this whole process, everybody has to wear a sales, marketing, and support hat.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to communicate to the people in the way that they understand how to be communicated. So, a phrase I've heard over the years, to know what Mary Jane buys, look through Mary Jane's eyes.
Well, I want to thank Dan and DK for joining me today to talk about energy management. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you want to get started on your energy management plan or maybe need a little help, we're going to have some links in the show notes. Until next time, I'm Brian McDonald from Dude Solutions.
Thank you for listening to the Operate Intelligently podcast. Subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, leave us a review, and you can even email us at dspodcast@dudesolutions.com.